Canto 21. Cal wanted to pay attention to what was around him, but all he could think about were Sophie's words. The next pit would want him, and the one after would have him. With what he'd seen from above, he didn't want to be in any of them. Sophie stopped at the foot of the bridge, and Cal, being so preoccupied, nearly walked into her. That's strange. This one has a sign. Cal looked, and sure enough, there was a sign. And this one was even one he could read. Not everything God gives is meant for you to keep, he read out loud. He had heard that before. Absently, he said, and the things meant for you to keep are to be cherished. He turned to Sophie. You told me that. Huh, Sophie answered, but her focus was on the other side of the bridge, the left side. There's another one. They walked over and Cal read the next one out loud. And the ones who knowingly take what I give suffer from the most abhorrent form of theft. Cal froze. He knew what this meant, because just as he read it, he could imagine all the times he undercut a family's priceless heirloom. Sure, he could say it was his grandpa, but they were his hands. That's why they would want him. As disgusting as those actions seemed now, they were enjoyed in the moment. Look, Sophie cooed. Everything's clear. Let's just go across and move on. Just as Cal remembered how Sophie's words finished the sign on the right, he suddenly remembered what Sophie had said to the Jabba the Hutt girl at the convention center. We both know that's not how this works. He looked at this bridge. It didn't have sides at all, but big parapets in the middle. If he found himself on the side, it would be easy for him to fall in. He shivered. This time it does. Let's go. She took his hand and began to lead him over the bridge, as a mother leads a child. He felt like the cowardly lion being forced on Dorothy's quest. Even walking above this ditch now terrified him. You're doing great. Look, we're halfway there. Cal looked over to see what, at first, looked like the La Brea tar pit. Black sludge that bubbled and boiled. He felt his anxiety drop. There wasn't anything scary about tar. Then something, or someone, it was difficult to tell, began joyfully yelling. Hide, Sophie whispered. She shoved him behind a parapet. And don't move. They can't hurt me, so stay. As she said this, an honest-to-goodness gargoyle flew down, landing heavily on the bridge. He had a pitchfork that was very similar to the demonic kind that used to be in Saturday morning cartoons owned by classic Red Devils. Speared on the pitchfork was a man, wriggling like a worm on a hook. Bringing the pitchfork in front of him so the man could almost touch the ground, he sprinted to the side, jamming the pitchfork forward and flinging the man off into the ooze with a sickening plop. I got a new one. He's fresh, the gargoyle yelled. Cal, more curious than he should have been in such a situation, raised his head slightly so he could look into the tar. Apparently, it was much closer to the bridge than he realized, because the man was easy to see. He had been stuck on top, with his knees leaving him in a station of what looked like prayer. With his hands clasped, he begged to the gargoyle to spare him. Then the other gargoyles appeared. They must have been there the whole time, but they seemed to rise from the tar and start spearing the man over and over with their long forks. Cal leaned forward a bit more, hugging the parapet for stability. With his new vantage, he realized they were not actually stabbing, but more accurately, attaching. He watched as one stabbed something gooey in the tar, pulled it up, and stabbed it to the man. The more they did this, the more the man sunk, Liquefied objects stuck to him: an alarm clock, a toy train, an RC-powered car, all melting to him as they were stabbed to his body. It was weighing the man down. As he flailed and grasped to stay above the goo, he slowly sank with each stab. Ultimately, he lost as a gigantic bubble popped right over his head and he disappeared. "Thank you, Charon," Cal whispered to himself. Seeing all the objects being stuck to the man reminded Cal of the conference hall, and he couldn't fathom how he was able to carry all those items. Now, he wondered if it stuck to him like it did this man. He actually pictured himself in the man's place, screaming for help as the gargoyles ignored his pleas. He shivered yet again at the thought of it. Cal felt a hand on his shoulder and jumped, nearly falling out into the open. He turned, ready to run, but it was Sophie crouched down beside him. Whispering, she asked, "Do you see the end of the bridge?" Cal strained toward the end and felt in doing so he could, so he nodded. "There are demons down there. I'm going to secure a safe passage. Come when I call." "Wait," Cal whispered. "What about you?" Patting his shoulder, she reminded, "Don't worry about me. I'm a deliverer. I'll be fine." She got up and made a beeline for the bridge. But Cal couldn't help but worry, and that feeling was made worse when she approached and multiple pitchforks shot up and aimed at her. It was the pitchforks that gave away the gargoyles holding them. If they weren't pointed, the creatures melted into the scenery. Sophie began talking, but Cal couldn't hear. As quietly as he could, he began to crawl towards them. He could overhear what was being said. "I smells it. She reeks of theft," said one. "Oh, I smell it too, but it must not be this one. She's a messenger. She brings us our toys," said the second. "Oh, come off it," Sophie nearly laughed. "I brought you no one, so stop pretending. I need passage." They raised their pitchforks more. With the gesture, it looked like Sophie was now the next to be pitched into the black tar. "Stand back," she said with a ferocity Cal himself wouldn't have had in the same situation. "Lucy sent me. That's why he's not yours. He's hers." One of the pitchforks dropped with a clang. "Lucy?" "Why is this a shock on every single level?" Sophie lamented. "Yes, back in limbo, she gave me this job." She turned and called back, "Cal?" Finally seeing him, she smiled. "Okay, scaredy cat, you're safe now." It was clearly her strength that was protecting him, because even as he rushed to get to her, the gargoyles were eyeing him with vengeful lust. The one had dropped his pitchfork, was whispering to Sophie. The only words Cal heard was, "All the levels?" He would have strained to hear more, but it was clear the others were ready to jab him now and throw him in the goo. "Let me jab once," said one. "Just poke him good to give him a taste of his place." That's when the gargoyle, talking to Sophie, turned his attention to the others. "Snatcher!" "Absolutely not." This seemed to finally calm them down, but Cal was taking no chances, standing as close to his guide as humanly possible. The one who had talked to Sophie now said to them both, "The bridge over the next ditch. It fell to pieces. You need to go along the ridge. Further down, there's a bridge in one piece." "When did it fall?" Sophie asked. "Oh, before my time. 2,000 years or so. You can't even tell there was a bridge there once. Apparently, Christ did it. Ask him when you get to see him, will you?" He was looking at Cal. Shocked, Cal simply answered, "Sure." Turning back to his quad, he ordered, "You lot are going to take these two safely to the next bridge." Then he began to call out names. Cal could barely believe they were names. "That means you, Grizzly, Helkin, Dead dog, pig tusk, cat claw. Then he smiled at Cal. Grafter. And then he winked before continuing on with the others. Dragon Tooth, Cramper, and Crazy Red. Curlybeard, I'm putting you in charge. Cal swallowed hard. Did he call him Grafter? He wasn't a grafter. Snatcher? Snatcher perked up at the sound of his name. Go back to work. I'm not letting you anywhere near this. Snatcher growled, but flew up and away in response. Pleased with Snatcher's departure, he continued. This isn't a break. You'll be guarding them and keeping an eye on the sledge. Understand? Yes, sir, they all barked. You trust this? Cal frantically whispered. The moment we're away from that one, they'll be dragging me down into the tar. I trust Lucy, she calmly answered. And if she sent us on a journey, we'll remain safe as long as we're on it. That barely reassured him. It didn't help that as they went to leave, each of the 9 gargoyles stuck their tongue out at their captain. In response, the captain gave them each a generous fart, raising his leg or shaking his ass with each toot. He believed it had to be true. This ditch wanted him. Why else was this captain calling him Grafter? He braced himself, trusting Sophie, and ignoring the butt trumpet that sounded as he passed, and wondered what ditch would take him.